Russell Westbrook needed to change for the Los Angeles Lakers to reach their potential this past season, and he didn't. He kept on chucking mid-range jumpers, he kept on turning the ball over, he kept on losing focus on defense. But now Frank Vogel's gone, and Darvin Ham is the Lakers head coach, and Ham is asking Westbrook to also change in exactly the ways Russ needs to.
One thing we always preached and will continue to preach to be our foundation of our teams is a defensive mindset, being able to defend at a high level. And I challenged him, and he accepted the challenge. You know, that's a part of the word sacrifice we use, and being able to move him around in different spaces on the floor as we go back on the offensive end. Sometimes he's going to be off the ball, slashing. Sometimes he's going to play in a dunker. Sometimes he's going to be initiating things. He may post up a little bit. He may be the screener in pick and rolls. So being able to diversify his plan of attack, where he's not just rushing the ball up the court, facing 3 defenders every time.
So that's promising. Attentive defense, a diverse offensive role, off-ball cutting, posting up, screening. As long as Russ accepts the role and embraces doing it the entire season. Because when the head coach of your team is making those demands live on the radio, I take this as Russ's last chance in LA. If the Lakers keep him into the season and if he still doesn't change, then he's got to go. And it's been difficult for him to adapt so far during his Lakers tenure to fit in with LeBron James, just like all of LeBron's co-stars have in the past. But as frustrating as it is, sometimes change isn't so easy.
If you think about the Russell Westbrook story, from where he came from, the underdog story that he is, to the heights he achieved as a player, your strengths are often your greatest weaknesses. And I think his stubbornness and his inability to think that he can't achieve everything was what made him so great in the first place, but it's hurting him at the tail end of his career, right? And it's frustrating. I think it's worth exploring on a macro level why I was against the deal in the first place. But I don't disagree with you. The tweaks that need to be made to get Russell Westbrook to play more effective basketball, winning basketball, at least in the regular season, right? Let's baby steps. Let's not even talk about the playoffs. In a regular season, the path is there. You've laid it out. Like, he can be a devastating cutter off ball. He can be a phenomenal screener. He's so strong and he's so stout. Like, he really looks like a player. I mean, you look at what GP2 is doing this series, right? You look at what
Bruce Brown and the Nets. Yeah.
Exactly, right. It's a perfect example, right?
Even Derek White, for that matter, to an extent.
Absolutely, right? And you look at somebody like Russell Westbrook, who obviously is brilliant, who's an amazing basketball player, and just an all-timer will remember. And of course, you should be able, you could look at him and say, hey, man, just do that. Why can't you do that? And on a macro level, though, my whole issue with this whole Russell Westbrook experience has been, you had Anthony Davis and LeBron James as the pillars of the franchise, right? And I think it's actually part of this conversation is we should also be talking about Anthony Davis, and I think we should get to that. But they're one of the more versatile duos that have been put together. They can play small. I'm talking about LeBron and Anthony Davis now. They can play small, big, small, slow, fast. They can switch. They can guard man to man. They can play drop coverage. Like, they can do it all. It was such a unique pairing that even I wasn't. I was expecting that they would be great, but I could not imagine how great they actually ended up being in 2020. And 2021 was unfortunately a lost year to injuries. But with Russell Westbrook at this stage in his career and the way he plays, the issue is there's really only one way to play with the Russell Westbrook, right? There's a reason why in Houston they sent Capella out, because they gave up on trying to play a different style or try to integrate Russ. In Washington, at some point in the season, they decided, okay, we're going all Russ ball and we're just going to ride this as much as we can. That wasn't going to fly in LA, and they miscalculated their ability to maybe, I don't know what LeBron and Russ talked about that got LeBron on board in the first place and got them so excited. Clearly that didn't pan out. At the press conference at the end of the season that Russell Westbrook did, he clearly felt like, hey, I still made all the sacrifices. I did everything right. I don't know what's wrong with you. It was all Vogel's fault. And I hope that the front office is not listening and saying, yeah, it was Frank Vogel's fault. Darvin Ham, he's saying all the right things. He'll fix this. Well, my question to Darvin Ham is, he talked a lot about playing a 4-out, 1-in offense, right? And that sounds great. And obviously Milwaukee, right? Play Giannis at center, do all these things. There's a lot of interesting things that he can bring to the table. Who's that one though? Who's that one inside? If that's Russell Westbrook, okay. Now let's get to actually my biggest disappointment with the Lakers at this stage. And it's a little bit of a curveball because I know that Russell Westbrook is the sort of biggest, he's the big name, quote unquote, failure of last season. What has Anthony Davis done, right? I fully expected coming into the regular season last year that Anthony Davis was going to look at LeBron and say, look, Giannis just won Finals MVP. 2 years ago, we were talked about in the same sentence. In fact, some people were saying I was better. I want to show that I am better. I am this good. I can do this. And LeBron, load manage, do whatever you need to do. Me and Russ got this. Russ and me are going to run pick and roll. I'm going to win MVP this year. You stay ready for the playoffs. Let's do this. Man, that is not what happened, right? And forget, he came into camp heavy. And that's not due to lack of work ethic. Like he worked out too hard, right? He bulked up too much. So
they wanted him to get bigger, right?
Right. And because they're like, oh, you'll play center. Well, then they signed DeAndre Jordan. So it's just a comedy of errors there. But look, man, Anthony Davis shot 18% from three last year. 18. And so I look at this and I look at Darvin Ham looking at this as a, 4 out, 1 in. Who are the 4 people out? How are you generating any real offense in this situation with Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis on the floor? And I got to say, man, as optimistic as you could try to be about this team, I just don't see it with this Lakers roster right now.
You hit on a point about, the AD Russ fit that I think ties to what we've seen through this postseason and last year's too, for that matter, with the Bucks winning the championship, Suns making the finals. The Lakers had flexibility in their lineups. Like you said, their ability to play different styles defensively, to play small, to play big. Not by having Russ, they lose that lineup flexibility that we see the Celtics have. They can play with just Horford at the 5 or Rob Williams at the 5 or both those guys. They can play with smaller, quicker backcourts. The Warriors, we're seeing them with Looney and with Draymond play effectively. We're seeing just Draymond at the 5. We even saw a little bit of Iguodala at the 5, which is, we're seeing, the Bucks. They can use Giannis at the 5 or have Lopez spacing out or Bobby Porter spotting up in the corner. The ability to play different styles and use different schemes, especially on defense, and to have different types of combinations that are all highly effective. Like we talk so much about individual versatility, switching screens. You can defend 1 through 5, but that's also true for the coaches to have the ability to have versatility with the lineups that they put on the floor that can dictate what the other team does, giving you an advantage, or to counter what another team is doing and to, hold off against that Warriors small ball 5, whatever it might be. The Lakers just don't seem to have that anymore. So in the context of that 4 out, 1 in, I mean, AD and Russell Westbrook as of today, and less lethal shooter that you saw the photo of him right with AD, right? Yeah, lethal shooter on Instagram. He's working with Anthony Davis, or at least there's a photo of them together. I have not heard if they're working together completely, but there's a photo of them together after AD said he hasn't shot since early April. One of those guys is going to have to be an effective out. One of those 4 that are out. Otherwise, they don't have that flexibility we're talking about.
I'm glad you brought it. You circle back to the finals, and this is kind of the exercise I've been doing, and also evaluating somebody like Malik Monk. Right? It's just like, if you think about it, how many minutes would these guys play in the finals? And I ask you, how many minutes would Russell Westbrook? Forget the Russell Westbrook we saw last year. That's too easy of an answer. Russell Westbrook, with his defensive, whatever his capabilities are, his offensive weaknesses and strengths, you can put it all on the table. How many minutes does Russell Westbrook play this series?
Is he playing for the Celtics or playing for the Warriors?
Let's say he's playing for the Celtics.
Oh boy.
You see what I'm saying, right?
I don't think he's playing ahead of Smart or White. No.
Exactly.
Or is he playing ahead of Pritchard? Those 5 to 10 minutes?
So we're talking about
ahead of Grant Williams?
I don't think so. Grant Williams is pretty big, right? He's big body. You want to throw.
Yep.
And so my point is like, even in a best case scenario, the issue with Russ at this stage in his career is I have a hard time seeing it. And it hurts me to say this because I'm a UCLA alum. I was at UCLA when Russell Westbrook was there. I've been rooting for this guy his entire career. Like there is an element of the way the kind of strong-headedness and just the sheer force of nature that he is that does remind me of Kobe, right? And he's definitely reminded me of that when he was in OKC. But I always had this fear in my mind. I'm like, listen, I love watching Russ. I just don't want him on my team. And this is kind of the reason why.